What would you do if you lived in a small, narrow room and every night dreamed of a little girl in a red dress standing next to your bed, singing? Today, I'm going to share a story from a netizen named Henry. He told a real and bizarre experience that happened while he was renting a place. In the following video, to help everyone better understand, I'll be narrating the story from a first-person perspective. In June 2018, I started working at a foreign trade company. To make commuting easier, I planned to rent a place near the company. After work on Friday, I met with a real estate agent who showed me several apartments she had available. But after viewing them, I wasn't really satisfied. Either the environment was poor or the price was too high. As the day turned to night, I was ready to leave. But the agent told me there was still one more apartment I hadn't seen. She said it was quite spacious, well-furnished, and most importantly, the rent was incredibly cheap. I was going to turn her down, but the mention of low rent made me reconsider. Since my salary wasn't high at the time, I really didn't want to spend too much on housing. When we got there, I found out it was a loft. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, and even a terrace. The most surprising part was that the rent for this 50-something square meter place was only $1,400 a month. In a city where land is so expensive, this was an unbelievably good deal. Still, I had a few reservations. The complex was a bit old, and the lighting wasn't great. The sloped ceiling in the loft made it inconvenient to move around. Sensing my hesitation, the agent quickly said I only needed to pay a 1-month deposit. Since I was a new tenant, she'd even throw in free Wi-Fi. I was pretty tempted after hearing that, so I signed the lease on the spot. The next day, I moved in right away and invited a few girlfriends to help me clean up. While we worked, I kept bragging to them, saying, "Look at this, such a big place for such a cheap price." I was thrilled. Little did I know that in the months to come, this loft would bring me a kind of fear I had never experienced before. About half a month after moving in, one of my college classmates, let's call her Muna, came. She called me and asked to crash at my place for a few days while she looked for her own apartment. A few days into her stay, she told me that the room she was sleeping in felt strange. Every night around 2 a.m., she would suddenly wake up for no reason and have a hard time falling back asleep. I figured she just wasn't used to a new bed, but Muna said that normally, her greatest strength was being able to sleep anywhere. She didn't know what was going on these past few nights. A couple more days went by. When I asked her again how she was sleeping, she said everything was fine now. She'd been sleeping well lately. But from that point on, I suddenly started having nightmares. I'd often wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. At first, the dreams took place inside the loft. I could see myself sleeping, and beside me was always a little girl in a red dress, watching me and humming a song. Every time I woke up from those dreams, I would always wake up to find myself lying in exactly the same position as I had in the dream. A few days later, Muna found a place and moved out, but I continued to have nightmares every single night. I couldn't help but let my imagination run wild. I even bought a peach wood sword online and hung it in the bedroom, hoping it would ward off evil. But it was completely useless. The nightmares kept haunting my sleep night after night. As time went on, my mental state started to deteriorate. I was always tired and completely drained. During that period, I got sick frequently, made constant mistakes at work, and even my daily life felt full of setbacks. I often heard whispering voices outside the bathroom while I was showering at night. What was strange was that the loft bathroom didn't even have a window. So where were those voices coming from? About a month later, the strange events escalated. I started noticing that items in the apartment would mysteriously move on their own. For example, I'd hang my jacket on the rack, but after waking up, I'd find it folded in my bedroom closet. I started wondering if I had developed a sleepwalking disorder. Around that time, my close friend Muna came to visit during her vacation. Since we hadn't seen each other in a long time, we had endless things to talk about. So she ended up staying with me for several days. But during her stay, she kept telling me, "Why am I having so many nightmares lately?" One morning, she told me that after I left for work, she was lying in bed playing with her phone when she suddenly felt someone sit on the edge of the bed. Thinking it was me, she asked, "Why haven't you left yet? You're going to be late for work." But when she turned around, she realized I wasn't even home. Later, in August, I was lying on the sofa watching a variety show on my laptop. Around 10 p.m., I was too tired to continue, so I shut the laptop down and placed it on the coffee table. I didn't even go back to the bedroom, I just fell asleep on the couch. Around 2 or 3 a.m., I was startled awake by the sound of the variety show playing from my laptop, but I clearly remembered shutting it down before I went to sleep. Yet somehow, it had turned itself back on and started playing again. I panicked and ran straight into the bedroom, grabbed Muna, and broke down crying. She was so shocked by my sudden breakdown that she was terrified. When she finally left, she kept urging me, "You need to move out of that place. There's something seriously wrong with it." I agreed with her on the surface, but in my heart, I was thinking, where else could I find such a spacious place with such low rent? Aside from the nightmares, I hadn't suffered any real harm in the past 2 months. I kept telling myself, as long as I have a clear conscience, I don't need to be afraid of ghosts knocking on my door. But then came a Saturday morning in October. Just as I was half awake and about to get out of bed, I suddenly felt a heavy weight pressing down on my thighs. I woke up instantly, but there was nothing in front of me. Still, I could clearly feel something pressing down on my thighs. A wave of overwhelming fear shot through my entire body. I was trembling uncontrollably, but my mind remained clear. I knew I had to do something. So I gathered all my strength and shouted, "Get off!" The moment I yelled, that heavy pressure vanished instantly. As soon as I could move, I rushed out of the room and ran downstairs. It was only then that I truly realized whatever this thing was, it wasn't friendly. In fact, it clearly didn't want me living there anymore. That was the moment I finally made up my mind to move out. I immediately called my boss to request leave. My boss was very understanding. Even though my excuse about a haunted apartment sounded a bit ridiculous, he still gave me 3 days off. The next day, around noon, when the sun was at its strongest, I braced myself and went back to pack up my things. As soon as I stepped into the building's stairwell, I was overcome by a terrifying silence that made my whole body tremble uncontrollably. I just wanted to gather my stuff as quickly as possible and get out. When I reached out to grab the suitcase from the top of the wardrobe, just as I was about to go get a stool, the suitcase suddenly fell down on its own. I stood there frozen, my legs shaking. I didn't even bother to take anything with me. I turned and ran out immediately. In the end, I got a few male colleagues to help me move. Thankfully, nothing weird happened during the move. After everything I'd experienced, I no longer dared to be tempted by low rent. My new apartment was small and expensive, but it had good lighting, and the community was always bustling with people. A long time later, I happened to pass by that old complex again. While chatting with an old man walking nearby, I finally learned the truth. There had once been a murder in that attic apartment I had lived in. If you're in a stairwell late at night and you can never seem to reach the floor where your apartment is, unable to return home, what would you do? Today's story is a submission from a fan named Sandra. It recounts a true, bizarre experience they had a few years ago with their ex-boyfriend. To make the story more vivid and easier to understand, I'll narrate it in the first person. My ex-boyfriend and I were college classmates. In 2018, right after we graduated, we both started working. Since we were new to the workforce, our income wasn't high, but we both wanted a certain quality of life, so we decided to rent a one-bedroom apartment in a high-end neighborhood in Harbin on a monthly basis. After paying the rent, we were left with barely any money. To ease our financial burden, my boyfriend's parents planned to buy us a home. At the time, our relationship was very good, and we were planning to get married the following year. So this home would also become our future marital residence. However, new apartments were quite expensive back then and located far from where we worked. After weighing the pros and cons, we decided to buy a second-hand apartment in the same upscale community we were renting in. Although it was a resale unit, it had a high cost-performance ratio because the original apartments came with quality renovations. We found a unit online that we were satisfied with in terms of both price and floor level. When we reached the designated floor, we noticed that several doors had talismans posted on them. The agent explained these were for attracting wealth. My boyfriend and I didn't think much of it at the time. We just assumed the previous owners were superstitious. After we bought the place, We adopted a 1-year-old golden retriever from a friend and named him Jack. Back then, we were both night owls, especially my boyfriend, who often stayed up until 1 or 2 a.m. Because of that, we usually walked the dog around 10 p.m. when the neighborhood was quiet and Jack could run around freely. If it was too late, we'd take him to the underground parking garage or stairwell to let him play. We made sure she got plenty of activity every day. This incident happened around midnight one night. We were cleaning the apartment and had just finished mopping the floors. My boyfriend noticed that the living room floor was still damp, so he opened the door to let the air circulate and help it dry. He forgot that Jack might slip out through the open door. When I went to close it, I realized he was already gone. We lived on the 8th floor, about halfway up the building. My boyfriend and I split up to search the stairwell. He went upstairs, I went down. I checked each floor carefully. When I got to the ground floor, I didn't see Jack anywhere, and the building's entrance was shut, so she definitely couldn't have gotten out. I quickly called my boyfriend. He said he had already searched the top floor and hadn't seen Jack. I told him, "Let's search again. Maybe she's just sitting near someone's door." After hanging up, I continued searching. A few minutes later, I reached the 7th floor and still didn't see her. I called my boyfriend again to ask where he was, and he said he had just reached the 2nd floor. At that moment, I was completely baffled. There's only one stairwell in the building, and I had checked every floor thoroughly. The fire doors on each floor's entryway were all closed. How could my boyfriend and I have missed each other? Feeling a bit annoyed, I said, "I'm coming down to meet you. Don't hang up, just keep heading up." But by the time I had reached the 2nd floor, I still didn't see him. Then suddenly, his voice came through the phone saying he had already reached the 5th floor. At that moment, a scene from a horror movie I'd once seen popped into my head about a couple in a parking garage. Even though they were just steps apart, they couldn't see each other. I couldn't help but shiver all over. I didn't want to worry my boyfriend, so I forced myself to sound calm and said, "I'm heading home first. You keep looking carefully." After hanging up, I realized my legs had gone weak. They no longer obeyed me. Forcing down the fear inside, I started climbing back up toward the 8th floor, one slow, agonizing step at a time. But when I finally made it back up, I was completely stunned. I had somehow reached the 9th floor. Thinking I must have misread it, I rubbed my eyes hard. But no, it really was the 9th floor. So I turned back and started walking down again. Then I found myself back on the 7th floor. I went up and down like that 2 or 3 times, but no matter what, I just couldn't reach the 8th floor. I pulled out my phone and called my boyfriend again. But this time, his phone wouldn't connect. I was so terrified I didn't know what to do. I just crouched down in the stairwell and started crying uncontrollably. After crying for a while, I suddenly remembered there was an elevator. I ran to the 9th floor elevator lobby and got in. I pressed the button for the 8th floor. Luckily, the elevator worked fine. As soon as the doors opened, I ran out and quickly opened the door to our apartment. I immediately called my boyfriend again. Thankfully, this time he picked up. He said he had found Nuno. I told him not to take the stairs and to come back via the elevator right away. When he returned, I told him what had just happened. He also felt something was really off. After I had said I was going home, he had continued searching for Nuno on his own. But while walking down from the top floor, even after more than 10 minutes, he still hadn't reached the ground floor. Normally, when we walked Jack in the stairwell, it took just 3 to 5 minutes to reach the bottom. We both sat quietly for a long while, trying to process everything. Then we looked at the time and realized it was already past 1 a.m. Somehow, all that time had passed without us noticing. From that day on, our habits completely changed. For months afterward, we never dared to stay up late again. Even when cleaning the house, we made sure it was done on weekend mornings. And we never walked Nuno in the stairwell or parking garage again. Back then, we didn't understand why Jack always barked at night while in the parking garage. But now, it seemed clear. She must have seen something invisible to human eyes. After this incident, I started getting injured and falling ill frequently. Both my physical and mental health seemed off. Our families had originally encouraged us to get married soon, hoping it would bring better fortune. But in the end, my ex-boyfriend and I didn't end up together. After the incident, it was like he had become a completely different person. From being attentive and caring, He started working overtime constantly and barely came home. When he did talk to me, he was always impatient, even yelling at me sometimes. We argued a few times, but nothing changed. Later, I accidentally discovered that he had been having an ambiguous relationship with a female coworker. That final time, I didn't fight with him. I simply ended the relationship calmly.